What's going on, everyone? It is the Derv, and today I am bringing you kind of an unconventional way to spam one of my personal favorite supers, Novabomb. This build has incredible DPS potential, generates a ton of orbs of power, makes you almost unkillable, and can be taken into a variety of activities. So if you've been looking for a new way to enjoy one of your favorite supers, keep it here because this build absolutely does not disappoint. Whether you're running the seasonal activities, or you're running in raids, or you're running just regular everyday things, this build can absolutely work for you. So shout out to my boy Chonus, who showed me the light and gave me some ideas to even create this build. One of my followers in Discord. All right, guys, let's get on into it. Here we go. So to get things started off, of course, if you want to spam Nova Bombs, your super of choice has to be Novabomb Cataclysm. We're going to be running on the Prismatic Warlock subclass. For abilities, we're going to be running with Healing Rift, Burst Glide. We're also going to be taking advantage of Arcane Needle with its up to 3 stacks, which you should theoretically have at least 2 at any given time. And to round things out, we're going to be going with the Storm Grenade. It is actually imperative that you do equip the Storm Grenade as well as the Arcane Needle, or this build will not work as well. For aspects, number 1 on the list is going to be Lightning Surge. While sliding, activate your charge melee ability to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt targets as you rematerialize. Targets that are hit by your lightning strikes grant you stacks of bolt charge. So not only are we going to be gaining stacks of bolt charge, which will eventually discharge lightning strikes at the same time, but we will be jolting targets as well, which counts as an arc debuff. So we're not actually going to be using the arcane melee as a normal arcane melee. We're actually going to be using those in this manner every single time. That is actually imperative to making this build work, which I'll explain in a little bit. Next up, we've got Feed the Void. Defeat a target with any ability to activate Devour. Your Devour effects are improved, restoring additional health and grenade energy. I don't really need to go into why this is going to be our number 2 aspect here. We want more health, especially because all we're going to be getting from our orbs of power is overshield, which I'll explain in a second, and we want to be able to generate our grenade energy back as fast as possible so we can continue on with arc damage as well as ability damage that's going to return us more ability energy and ultimately our super in very little time. For fragments, first up on the list is going to be Facet of Purpose. Picking up an orb of power grants either Bolt Charge, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. Because we are going to be running Nova Bomb, our orb of power is going to give us an Overshield. You are armored with a protective barrier of Void Light, reduces damage taken from combatants. Now, combined with your Rift, you will be resistant for a pretty long time when you're doing damage to a boss or major, where you're going to be standing in theoretically 1 or maybe a little bit of 2 places within the same area. Next up is going to be Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Now for this one, we're going to be taking advantage of both on a very regular basis. We're going to have a little bit of a fix for running with a main dark energy weapon to get us some melee energy back. But remember, every time that we throw that grenade and it kills an enemy, that's going to give us melee energy right back because it is light damage. So the key here is to try to keep your melee up as often as possible. Next up is going to be Facet of Sacrifice. While you have an Arc, Solar, or Void buff, ability Final Blows grant bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. Now, we're not going to be spamming Transcendence, but we do want to have it regularly available. So, because we're going to be running with a lot of arc damage in this build, having a darkness damage weapon is going to help us balance the Darkness Transcendence energy regeneration, and having Facet of Sacrifice is going to add to it. Next up is going to be Facet of Awakening. Rapidly defeating targets with light or darkness damage or super final blows generates an elemental pickup of the matching damage type. Since we're going to be running with mainly strand and arc damage in general, we're going to be generating tangles as well as ionic traces. The bigger one of the two, of course, is going to be the ionic trace, a pure a bolt of pure arc energy that travels along the ground, seeking towards its creator, which is you. When picked up, ionic traces grant ability energy. So because we're going to be spamming arc abilities, we're going to be also generating ionic traces, which is also going to refund us energy for said abilities that we may just have used. So kind of a double bonus there, if you will. Last but not least, Facet of Dominance. Your Void Grenades weaken targets, and your Arc Grenades jolt targets. -10 to Discipline, which is kind of a bummer, but again, I'm not really worried about getting the grenade back because we're going to have Devour activated practically the entire time. Depending on the activity, I should say, if it is a slower moving activity, you may not have Devour coming back to you as often. However, with the breaks in between action, even if your discipline is a little bit lower than where you prefer it to be, you really shouldn't be hurting, especially even in a slower moving activity, not necessarily one that's extremely ad dense. Some people may debate what to put here. If you don't like Facet Dominance, let's say you want to have a way to pierce barrier champions through your fragments in general, you can always slap on Facet of Dawn since this is going to be a melee heavy build. You will be proccing Radiant as well as your nearby allies will also be proccing Radiant when you give a powered melee hit to a combatant. So just something to think about with that. And of course, you can pierce barrier champs when you have that procced. Another fan favorite for that slot might be Facet of Protection. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. While Transcendent, the effect is increased. Of course, if you look at the lower left hand, I'm also going to be getting a +10 to my discipline and strength. However, I don't think the ends justify the means. You want to be able to jolt targets because jolt is going to play into our exotic armor, which in turn is going to play into practically everything that this build is about. So in my opinion, even if your stats aren't lovable, keep Facet of Dominance on, at least for a couple of runs of things that you normally find yourself in, just to see if you're really that strapped for stats. Speaking of stats, you want to focus on resilience, strength, and discipline in that order. You'll notice that my intellect is at a T3. A T3 is the minimum. Repeat it with me, folks. Minimum that you want your intellect to be. Any lower than that, then your base cooldown is going to be greater than 8 minutes and 20 seconds. So make sure at the bare minimum it is at a T3. I don't care where it falls between 30 and 40, but it's got to be above at least 30. We want our 30% damage resistance, which is why we want a T10 in resilience. We want to get our melee back as fast as possible. And of course, if you did not know, once you have a fully charged melee with Arcane Needle, your second and third charge melee regenerates faster. So just keep that in mind. Maybe it's not a really great idea to spam all three right away, unless you already have one still in the bank, so to speak. And discipline is last, but it's not really least. You still want to have decent cooldown on your grenade, so having your discipline somewhere between, I'll say, a T5 and a T8. I know that's kind of a broad range. A T5 you can still get by. A T8 would be ideal. You can see, of course, on the screen, I don't really have a T8, and I switched all my armor around as many times as I could think of, and I still really couldn't get it without hurting anything else. So the main thing is you want to try to get your strength at least to an 8, and you want to get your resilience up to a 10. And then, of course, wherever your other stats fall, as long as they don't completely fall off the border of what could be considered acceptable, I think you'll be fine. Recovery at a T4, honestly, is perfect. But if you don't happen to get it that high, if you're at a T3, I would say that's fine too. But any lower than a T3 for recovery, you're probably going to be hurting. Mobility, that doesn't really matter. I guess if you can make it above a T3, that's good, but it's not really going to hurt you in this build. For weapons, I'm going to go through each and just kind of give you different options. You guys can kind of pick how you want to do this, but this is what works best for me. In the primary slot, we've got From the Nether, Mirror Imago. Mirror Imago can roll with a variety of perks. One of the best perks for this style of build is Pugilist and hatchling. You want pugilist because every single kill that you get is going to grant you some melee back, and hatchling is just nice to have for additional tick damage when you're able to take advantage of the artifact. But if you don't have a good mirror mago, if you have a fan favorite Rufus's Fury, this will work fine. You can also craft this with pugilist as well as hatchling. I've got demo and hatchling on this, but honestly, switching between the two, it doesn't really matter. You want to be able to generate as much damage as possible as fast as you can. A tertiary option might be Multimac CCX. It is a lightweight frame, so you do move faster. You also can roll this with attrition orbs as well as kinetic tremors. Attrition orbs is nice because you don't actually have to put a siphon on your helmet if you can already generate orbs of power with your primary weapon, which means you can focus the siphon on your energy and your heavy weapon. Speaking of energy weapon, I fully recommend a weapon that has jolting feedback. Specifically, this trace rifle from the Guardian games. Dynamic sway reduction and jolting feedback is a fantastic duo to pair with this. But of course, you can also run with the grenade launcher from the Nether, Psychopomp, with Rolling Storm. That will work just fine. Or if you have something with Vol Shot on it, that will work as well. The key here is defeating arc debuff targets as much as possible. But one of the reasons why I have the Trace Rifle on here is kind of a backup DPS-C style weapon where I can take advantage of the artifact, which I'll get to here in a minute. So just use your best judgment. Last but not least, I'm going to give you guys a choice. Thunderlord, good old Thunderlord, Rain Havoc. Final blows generate lightning strikes and grant a stack of bolt charge, strong against overload champions. Of course, you get lightning rounds, feeding frenzy, return stroke. You're hard pressed to find a reason to take Thunderlord off. But if there was a reason to take Thunderlord off, it's going to be this bad boy right here, Microcosm. Paracasual Beam. Beam deals kinetic damage with bonus damage to shields. The Paracasual Imbuement is the key here. Because we were running with a Insta Burst DPS Super, this weapon will also pair very nicely. I don't have footage of me using this, but trust me when I say that I did. Because we're using Novabomb, this is one of the best weapons to pair with after you cast your Novabomb. It doesn't require a rift, it doesn't require buff, it doesn't require anything. Shoot your super off and go back to dealing damage. And what this does is it gives bonus damage once your super ends. And if you guys have followed me for a while, you know my love for Microcosm. No, absolutely none disrespect to Microcosm. I just like Thunderlord a little bit better here, but for what it's worth, at 1,000 rounds per minute, you can safely fire off approximately, and again, I'm being approximate, 275 to 325 rounds before your buff for Paracasual Imbuement runs out. That means fully empty, or fully loaded to fully empty twice, plus a little extra. And at 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, maybe even to 8,000, depending on what kind of debuffs the enemy has in front of you, that is a lot of damage in a very short amount of time. 19 seconds to be specific for those that are wondering. So either one of these will be great. I just like Thunderlord a little bit better, but if the artifact changes tomorrow, I may switch back over to Microcosm and just leave it there. However you guys want to fan is completely up to you. For the helmet, we're going to be going with Crown of Tempests. Like I mentioned before, thanks to my friend in my Discord, I was kind of taken back when I read a little bit closer to what Conduction Tines is telling us. While you have an arc ability equipped, arc ability or jolt final blows increase the recharge rate of your abilities and extend duration of Storm Trance. Yes, we're not using Storm Trance, but what's kind of glossed over with Crown of Tempest is that very first sentence. While you have an arc ability equipped, arc ability or jolt final blows increase the recharge rate of your abilities. So maybe not the whole sentence, but at least the first 65%. This is not saying that this has to be specifically arc abilities that get increased recharge rate. So this is any ability that you have equipped on your Prismatic Warlock. For whatever reason, when I've done videos on Crown of Tempest before, it never really seemed to dawn on me that I might be reading this a little bit wrong. Of course, an arc-specific subclass or an arc-heavy subclass, specifically even in Prismatic, is ideal here. This is a very, very good alternative that you can take into practically anything. So what our helmet mods are going to be is whatever your main ad clear weapon is, go ahead and put that siphon on. You're going to put 2 hands-on mods here. And I know what you're thinking, Durf, what about this heavy ammo finder mod? You always have that on. Well, if you find yourself in a situation where you're really coming up short on heavy ammo, go ahead and swap one of these out. But the key here is being able to, like I said in the intro, spam Novabomb. In order to spam Novabomb, you need to be able to reduce the cooldown of Novabomb, and the easiest way to do that is through helmet mods. So 2 hands on means in roughly 30 seconds of consistently using your melee and your grenade, you're going to be able to generate your super. And no, I'm not joking. I'm going to show you through this little clip right here what I'm talking about. So as you see, it didn't even take me that long to generate my super from nothing. As long as you've got a charge of melee at your disposal, you have the ability to generate even your Novabomb back extremely quickly with Crown of Tempests. For the general armor mods, go ahead and put on whatever you want, but I recommend trying to use a minor mod that only requires 1 energy in the first slot. And yes, it is 100% necessary to upgrade to Masterwork or the Artifice slot, because quite honestly, who doesn't need an extra 3 points in any of their stats? For the arms, go ahead and put on a minor mod in the first slot, and then what we're going to do is we're going to roll with 3 heavy-handeds. Now, unlike last season, you absolutely do need to spare 9 energy slots for 3 heavy-handeds, but the benefits outweigh the cons here. Yes, I am aware that we are not rolling with firepower, and our grenade funnel blows are not going to give us orbs of power, but don't let that sway you. Because of the amazing recharge rate of your abilities to begin with, your melee is going to be recharging extremely fast, which means every second that passes, you will be able to generate an orb of power. And what do orbs of power do for your abilities as well as your health? That's right, give it back. So trust me, roll with 3 heavy-handeds and a minor mod of your choice. For the chest armor, go ahead and put on the reserve mod for your heavy weapon of choice. It just so happens that my heavy and my special ammo weapon are the same element, so I put on arc reserves, but if I had an arc and I had microcosm on, I would absolutely 100% switch this to kinetic reserves, because who doesn't want more heavy ammo? Go ahead and put on 2 damage resistance mods, and here you can put on whatever kind of mod you need. As you see, you have 1 energy left over, so even if you need an extra 10 for resilience or recovery to get you where you need to be, go ahead and throw that here on your chest armor. For your legs, go ahead and put on Innervation, Absolution, and Invigoration. With that combination, you're able to put on a 4 energy mod if you need to for your general armor mod. But if you don't, you can always swap this out for a 2nd Absolution, or you can throw on an Orbs of Restoration. If you are going into another activity and you have to swap one of these out for recuperation, 100% go ahead and swap it out with Innervation. Last but not least is going to be the class item. Go ahead and put on Reaper, as you're going to be using your class ability semi-regularly. And go ahead and put on Outreach and Font of Restoration. You want your health back as quickly as possible. You also want to be able to cast your Rift whenever you want. Go ahead and maximize your Artifice slot if you have the Guardian Games class item, or if you don't, go ahead and put on whatever general armor mod that you need. For the artifact, I'm going to go through how I have it on the screen here, explain why I have it, what you see on the screen here, and then kind of give you guys free reign to change things up depending on the needs of your battle. In the first column, I've got Overload machine guns, piercing sidearms, and Overload trace rifles. Now, in a perfect society, when I go into, or in a perfect world, I guess I should say, not necessarily society, but in a perfect world, when we go into an activity, we should theoretically have all 3 champs accounted for. Clearly, we only have overload champs accounted for with this build. So if you're going to be going into an activity where you have 2 or maybe 3 different champs, make sure you have weapons that can stun, because your main ad clear play is still going to be your lightning surge for getting your super back. Again, this is a super spam build. So the weapons aren't completely limited to the ones that I gave you. It's just a guide for generalized content. And then once you get into more specific content, switch this first column up with whatever you need to make the build work. But I would recommend keeping overload machine guns on if you're going to run Thunderlord, or at the bare minimum, overload trace rifles if you're going to be running Microcosm. In the second column, I've got Vile Weave, Unraveling Orbs, and Overclock and Load. Overclock and Load makes sense because I'm running Arc Energy and Heavy Weapon. Unraveling Orbs makes sense with Vile Weave because I'm running a Strand submachine gun. In the third column, I've got Photonic Flare as well as Dielectric. Now, Photonic Flare is kind of up to you. Defeat an exhaust or severed target with arc damage releases a blinding burst. If you've seen that procced regularly on your screen, you know it looks pretty darn cool, and it is extremely powerful. Well, okay, I guess maybe not extremely powerful is the way that I would pair it, but when you've got that champ down to almost finishing health level, that additional blinding burst can be the difference between you being able to finish that champ and moving on with your life, or you having to back away because that champ is starting to slowly gain health when you weren't expecting it to. So Photonic Flare, I think, is worth it, especially with ad-dense activities. And of course, Dielectric, defeating arc to buff targets, grant bolt charge. Rapidly defeating arc to buff targets spawns an orb of power and heals a small portion of health when you have it boosted. You might be asking, why, Derf, don't you have Hold the Line? Well, Hold the Line is worth it if you want it to be. If you don't want to have Photonic Flare, go ahead and throw on Hold the Line. That would be my recommendation for this column. In the fourth column, go ahead and put on Flashover so that your lightning bolts deal more damage, and when you have maximum stacks of bolt charge, you become amplified. Go ahead and put on Horde Shell if you're running a Strand submachine gun like I am. And make sure you put on Harsh Refraction so that your jolting feedback trace rifle can deal additional tick damage because it's going to have a debuff matching its element type. In the final column, I only have one thing, and it's based on what I have selected for weapons, and that is Heavy Ordnance Regeneration. I don't care about Bolt Charge because I'm going to be running a melee heavy gameplay regardless. So I'm always going to have Bolt Charge, which means you're always going to have Bolt Charge. Yes, it's nice if you stun a champion and get a random max stack of Bolt Charge, but it's really not necessary considering you're going to be proccing that. I mean, so often it's not even funny. So make sure you put on Heavy Ordnance Regeneration if you are running Thunderlord, because it grants damage resistance and increases grenade and melee regeneration for a short duration. If you boost this while Heavy Ordnance Regeneration is active, defeating powerful combatants disorients nearby rank and file combatants. So this is a great option for you to have if you're going to be running Thunderlord. Really, none of these other options are going to apply. Some might ask Elemental Supercharger, defeating exhaust or severed targets with weapons that match your super element grants super energy. That doesn't matter because we're running a Void Super with Strand and Arc damage. So that doesn't apply. I already explained the Defibrillating Blast. Void Flux doesn't apply here simply because we're not using a Void weapon. And Limit Break doesn't even apply here because casting our super while critically wounded or have an elemental buff matching your super element grants a period of increased super damage. I guess this could apply if you have Devour procced when you pop your super. However, you may not have Devour procced. You may only have Amplified procced depending on what you are doing at the given time. So just keep that in mind. You absolutely could swap this out for Limit Break, or I guess you could take another one from over here and put that on Limit Break if you want increased super damage. But because it's a super spam, I don't necessarily know if you really need the extra super damage unless you really are only running an activity where your super is the only form of damage that you have. That's why we have Thunderlord, to make up for you know, the breaks between our supers, if that makes sense. One of the reasons I recommend you guys try this build is because, one, it is quite a unique thought process. Pairing Crown of Tempests with a Void Super on Prismatic, on paper, in your head, you're like, well, wait a second, this isn't going to work. You know, Crown of Tempests is for Arc builds. Crown of Tempests is for Storm Trance. Crown of Tempests is for OG Arc classes. And why would I want to use my main ad clear as a strand weapon or even a kinetic weapon when I'm running Crown of Tempest? I should be running something that's got primary damage with, you know, an arc element behind it. And then how are we getting our super back quickly? Because, you know, I thought it was only arc abilities. That's what makes this build awesome. You want to be able to spam Novabomb? This is a great way to do it. I showed you that clip when we were going through the helmet, how fast I was able to proc Novabomb with basically nothing but abilities. And I understand that was a controlled experiment, but you see the method behind the madness. That's not necessarily counting your elemental siphon orbs. That's not even picking up every single orb that you generate from your melee in general. And that's not even counting when you're laying into a beefier enemy that's going to be regenerating your super ordinarily anyways. So on top of all of those things, I'm not going to say that this is a future-proof build, but this is certainly a build that, unless they completely nerf Crown of Tempest into the ground, or they nerf some of the perks that we have on our armor completely into oblivion, this build will theoretically work in future seasons, so long as it's not so tampered with that they completely erase the identity of not only the class, but also the armor and the perks within the armor. So yes, I absolutely, if you've never tried this before and you're thinking, wow, this is a little out there, try it. Go to the breakneck mission like I showed you and just try it yourself and see it in real time. I'm telling you, when I first saw it, I was like, wow. So huge shout out to my friend on my Discord that gave me this idea, and I kind of put my own twist on it. And yes, I did have his permission. This is we can do a lot of things now that we've kind of established this for Crown of Tempest. And yes, that might make me a noob for not knowing this previously, but every time I've run with Crown of Tempest before this moment, I was under the impression that it was mainly just arc abilities that it affected. It was just by sheer happenstance that my friend happened to bestow this little bit of knowledge on me. He had a little bit different of a build than what I've got on here. So I absolutely can 100% say that you guys can vary up the weapons over here and just make your heavy weapon a more quick burst type damage weapon, like machine gun for Thunderlord and of course Microcosm. I guess theoretically you could put a rocket launcher on here, but there's no arc rocket launcher that is also exotic that I would consider to be better than the two options we got. If you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there who would find this build interesting, or who is looking for a more off the beaten path way to use a fan favorite exotic like Crown of Tempest and Thunderlord and Novabomb, feel free to share this video with them. My goal is to help as many people as possible. As always, if you guys are looking for the dim link, it'll be in the description. And if you guys are looking for a non-toxic gaming community, feel free to follow the link in the description. Join my Discord. It's got a lot of great people on there. It is very active. It actually has picked up in the last few weeks. It's become very active. People helping people helping people get things that they didn't think they could get, and completing, you know, missions and dungeons and other things that maybe they had put on the back burner because they've been solo players their entire career in Destiny. Either way, it is non-toxic. It's accepting no matter what your skill level is or experience. There's people from top to bottom. Like I said, I got this idea from a friend on there, and I'm eternally grateful that I even opened up my Discord for folks to join and share their knowledge, because when you help someone, everybody gets better. That's what makes it a team game as well as an individual accomplishment game. It is the best of both worlds. So get on in there if you guys are looking for that non-toxic gaming community. And, if you need help, absolutely drop a like, drop a sub, drop a comment, whatever you guys need to do to get my attention. I will try to help as many people as possible. But if not, that community in that Discord is 100% available, and they are absolutely willing to help you guys out with whatever activities. I think we spent 4 hours in Iconoclasm the other night because we were trying to get someone the Microcosm trace rifle. And yes, I know some of you might be looking at this video going, wow, someone doesn't have Microcosm? Yes, lots of people don't have Microcosm because it requires team play. So get on into the Discord if you're looking for a non-toxic gaming community and, some people to pal around with around the galaxy defeating enemies of the Traveler. I'm going to switch it over and just kind of show you guys a couple more things real quick. All right, so I wanted to show this one more time. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. The first is, I obviously know that this is a controlled environment. This is mainly just to demonstrate how the build functions and show you in real time a super bar rising. Most strikes, most activities are not going to be this narrow of a hallway with as many ads spawning in a very memorable location. However, once you get into like the Court of Blades, for example, like this run, everything that you do is going to be amplified because you will be able to sprint around the battlefield picking off enemies with your lightning surge. And even though this wasn't like the best run ever with the most insane damage you've ever seen in your life, stacking damage on top of lightning surge, on top of picking up your orbs of power, being able to use all 3 of your weapons, that's what's going to make this build work for you in a variety of activities. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. I will see you next time. Take care.